The alien warship appeared above Earth's moon without any warning. Commander Jake Morrison sat in the Orbital Defense Station Columbus and watched his screens light up with alarm signals. But something felt different about this ship. It was not charging its weapons. Instead, it was sending out messages on every possible channel. Lieutenant Claire Hughes looked up from her station. Her voice was uncertain when she spoke. They are asking for sanctuary, not for themselves, for their young ones. Within an hour, everything became clear through careful translation work. The Vraks were a warrior species, proud and ancient. They were fighting a terrible war against the Korath Dominion. The ship's commander was called War Alpha Threnix. He had made an impossible choice. His fleet was losing the war. His people were dying. But his 2 children might survive if they could be hidden far from the war. Earth had stayed neutral in the conflict. The human military was considered too weak to matter in the calculations of the powerful alien races. Threnix believed that this weakness might be the only thing that could save his children. The diplomatic channels burned with heated debate. President Helen Carter called an emergency cabinet meeting while the Vrak ship waited in space, not approaching but not leaving either. Secretary of State Marcus Webb argued they should refuse, saying it was too dangerous to anger either side in an alien war. Secretary of Defense Linda Price disagreed. She said that helping refugees, even alien ones, was a test of humanity's principles. Dr. Nathan Cross was a xenobiologist who had spent his career studying the few alien specimens Earth had obtained. He made the final compelling argument. We know almost nothing about the galaxy out there. This is an opportunity to learn, to build a relationship, to show that humanity stands for something. The decision was made. The Vraks young would be granted asylum. The transfer happened in lunar orbit. A small group led by Jake Morrison and Nathan Cross put on their suits and crossed to the Vrak ship in a diplomatic shuttle. The interior was huge, built for beings who stood nearly 3 meters tall. The architecture seemed designed for both function and intimidation. War Alpha Threnix met them in a chamber that smelled of sulfur and ozone. He was massive. His scaled hide bore the scars of countless battles. His eyes were a deep amber color that reflected an intelligence equal to any human's. Beside him stood 2 smaller figures, barely reaching his chest. The cubs watched the humans with wide, curious eyes. You understand the risk you take, Threnix said through the translation device. His voice was a deep rumble. The Korath will not forgive aid given to Vrak's bloodlines. When they learn of this, and they will, you may become targets. We understand, Nathan replied. But we also understand that children deserve protection, no matter what species they belong to. Something shifted in Threnix's expression, a softening that seemed almost human. He placed a clawed hand on each cub's shoulder. Varix, Karen, these beings have offered you shelter. You will honor their kindness by learning from them, by growing strong in their care. Remember who you are. Remember what you come from. The cubs made a gesture that might have been a nod. Their smaller voices spoke in their native tongue. Threnix turned to the humans. I have loaded all cultural and biological data you will need into your systems. They can eat most protein-based foods, though they will need supplements. They are young, but they are Vraks. They will honor the warrior code even in exile. When will you return? Jake asked. Threnix was silent for a long moment. If the gods of war smile upon us, I will see them grown. If not, I trust you will tell them their sire died fighting, as is proper. The War Alpha knelt before his children one last time. He touched his forehead to theirs in what was clearly a gesture of deep affection. Then he stood, straightened his armor, and gestured for the humans to take his offspring. As the shuttle pulled away from the Vrak's warship, Claire Hughes watched the massive vessel on her displays. It hung in space for another 3 minutes, as if Threnix could not quite bring himself to leave. Then, with a flash of exotic energies, it vanished into faster-than-light travel, racing back toward a war that was consuming worlds. Inside the shuttle, the 2 Varax cubs sat strapped into hastily modified seats. Their amber eyes watched everything with an intensity that reminded Nathan of predators. But beneath that intensity, he recognized something else. Fear, loneliness, the universal emotions of children separated from their parent. It is going to be okay, he said gently, not sure if they could understand the translation device yet. You are safe now. The smaller of the 2, Karen, tilted her head and spoke. The translator rendered her words. Safe is not the warrior way, but Father has chosen this path for us. We will walk it with honor. Jake and Nathan exchanged glances. These were not ordinary refugees. They were the children of a warrior culture, carrying expectations and traditions humanity barely understood. As the shuttle docked with the Columbus station, neither man could have imagined how this moment would reshape human history. They had taken in 2 alien children out of compassion and principle. They had no way of knowing that in doing so, they had planted the seeds of something extraordinary. The cubs descended the docking tube into their new home, stepping onto human ground for the first time. Behind them, somewhere in the depths of space, their father raced toward battles that would determine the fate of his species. Ahead of them lay a world that would challenge everything they knew about strength, honor, and what it meant to be a warrior. The story of humanity and the Vraks had begun. 2 species from different worlds were about to learn that sometimes the most important bridges are built not through treaties or trade, but through the simple act of protecting children who have nowhere else to go. The media storm that followed the arrival of the Vraks cubs was bigger than anyone expected. Within hours of the public announcement, protests and counter-protests erupted across Earth's major cities. Some people saw the decision as dangerous folly that would draw humanity into an alien war. Others viewed it as humanity's first true act of compassion toward other species. The debate raged on news networks and government chambers, and across social media in 100 languages. But while Earth argued about what the cubs represented symbolically, a smaller group of people dealt with the practical reality of raising 2 young aliens. Dr. Nathan Cross found himself appointed as the primary guardian, along with his colleague Dr. Sophie Martinez. Sophie was a child psychologist who had volunteered for what she called the most important case study in human history. They converted a secure research facility in Colorado into a living space that could accommodate beings whose biology and psychology remained largely mysterious. The first few weeks were challenging in ways no one had anticipated. Varix and Karen were not like human children. At approximately 6 Earth years in equivalent age, they already stood nearly as tall as an adult human. Their strength was remarkable, their reflexes faster, their senses sharper. More significantly, they carried themselves with a dignity and seriousness that seemed wrong for children. They do not play, Sophie observed one evening, reviewing footage of the cubs' daily activities. Not the way human children play. Everything they do has purpose, structure. She showed Nathan a video of Varix and Karen in the facility's gymnasium. They moved through what appeared to be combat drills with precision. Their movements were coordinated as if they had practiced together for years. When they finished, they sat in meditation poses for exactly 10 minutes before beginning again. It is their culture, Nathan said. The data Threnix provided explains it. Vraks children begin warrior training almost from birth. Play, as we understand it, is seen as wasteful. Every action should strengthen the body or sharpen the mind. That is not healthy for developing minds, Sophie argued. Children need unstructured time, creative exploration, joy without purpose. We cannot just let them continue like this. The philosophical debate was settled by the cubs themselves. One afternoon, facility administrator Greg Palmer's daughter Katie wandered into the observation area where Varix and Karen were conducting their drills. She was 7 years old and had come to work with her father because school was closed. She got curious about the alien kids she had heard about. Katie watched through the reinforced glass for a moment, then did what any 7-year-old would do. She knocked and waved. Varix and Karen stopped mid-drill, confused by the interruption. Nathan, monitoring from the control room, made a quick decision and opened the secured door. "Hi," Katie said brightly, walking into the gymnasium with the fearlessness of the truly innocent. "I am Katie. Want to play tag?" Varix and Karen looked at each other, then back at the small human. The translator devices they wore rendered Varix's response. "We do not understand. What is tag?" Katie spent the next 5 minutes explaining the rules of tag with the seriousness of a professor delivering a lecture. The cubs listened carefully, their expressions suggesting they were trying to understand this information. Finally, Karen spoke. "This is a pursuit and evasion exercise. We understand such training." "It is not training," Katie protested. "It is fun." "You are it, Varix." She tapped his arm and ran, laughing. For a moment, Varix stood frozen, clearly unsure how to process what had just happened. Then something shifted in his posture. He looked at his sister and something passed between them. A decision made in silence. Varix ran after Katie. not with the calculated precision of a warrior drill, but with the enthusiasm of a child who had just discovered something new. His longer legs closed the distance quickly, but he slowed his speed, making the chase competitive rather than overwhelming. When he tagged Katie, she squealed with delight and took off after Karen. For the next half hour, Nathan and Sophie watched three children play together. The universal language of childhood temporarily overrode culture and species. The cubs' movements remained more graceful than Katie's, their reflexes still superior, but something had loosened in their demeanor. When Katie finally exhausted herself and sat down, panting and grinning, Varix and Karen sat beside her. "That was fun," Karen said, and the translator picked up a note of wonder in her voice. From that day forward, the approach to raising the cubs changed. Katie became a regular visitor, and other human children were gradually introduced. The cubs continued their warrior drills because those were important to their identity, but they also learned to play soccer, to draw with crayons, to tell jokes that did not quite translate properly but made everyone laugh anyway. But the exchange of learning went both directions. The humans quickly discovered that Vrax's culture, despite its focus on warfare, had depths that challenged human assumptions. Lieutenant Paul Harris was assigned as the military liaison to the project. He found himself in an unexpected conversation with Varix one afternoon. The cub had asked about human wars, trying to understand Earth's history. Paul had explained, with age-appropriate simplification, about World War II, the Korean War, Vietnam. "Your warriors fight for leaders and territories," Varix observed. "This we understand. But you speak of these wars with regret. Why wage wars you believe should not be fought?" The question struck Paul harder than expected. Sometimes wars are necessary. Sometimes they are mistakes we make because we are scared or greedy or confused. "Then your warriors lack honor," Varix said simply. "Among Vrax, a warrior may question a command. Must question it if honor demands. To fight without honor is not to be a warrior at all, merely a killer." Paul found himself explaining the concept to Sophie later, still wrestling with the implications. Their warrior code is not about blind obedience. It is about ethical responsibility. A Vrax soldier is expected to refuse immoral orders. More than that, they are culturally required to refuse them. "That is surprisingly enlightened for a warrior culture," Sophie said. "It has made me think about our own military culture," Paul admitted. "How many atrocities happened because good people followed bad orders?" 6 months into their stay, the cubs began attending classes at a specially designed school program. They learned human history alongside Katie and a dozen other carefully selected children. They studied Earth literature, science, and arts. They asked questions that often had no easy answers. "Why do humans fight each other when there are no other species to fight?" Karen asked during one social studies lesson. The teacher, Ellen Wu, paused before answering. "That is something we are still trying to understand ourselves. Humans have a long history of not recognizing each other's shared humanity. We divide ourselves by race, religion, nationality, and then act as if those divisions matter more than what unites us. That is inefficient," Varix said, "and dishonorable. A warrior defends the tribe. All humans are one tribe." "We are learning that," Ellen said softly. "Slowly we are learning." At night, in their private quarters, the cubs maintained their connection to Vrax culture. They meditated according to the ancient practices their father had taught them. They recited the warrior poems from memory, keeping their language alive. As the first year drew to a close, Varix and Karen had changed in subtle but significant ways. They still carried themselves with Vrax dignity, still practiced their warrior disciplines, but they laughed more easily. They had friends. They asked questions out of genuine curiosity about the universe. Neither species realized it yet, but the cubs were becoming something unique. Not purely Vrax, not human, but a bridge between worlds. The peace shattered on a Tuesday morning 3 years after the cubs' arrival. Varix and Corinne, now adolescents by Vrax standards, were in the middle of an advanced physics class when the alarm sounded across the Colorado facility. Nathan Cross sprinted to the command center, his heart pounding. The display showed what humanity had feared since the day they accepted the cubs. A Korath destroyer had entered Earth's solar system, and it was not alone. 3 escort frigates accompanied it, weapons hot, heading directly toward Earth. "How did they find us?" Sophie demanded, arriving moments behind Nathan. General Frank Lucas, the facility's military commander, spoke from his command station. "Does it matter? They are here. We need to evacuate the Cubs immediately. But the Korath had planned well. Ships appeared in orbit around Earth, cutting off escape routes. The message that came through was brief and brutally clear. Surrender the Vrak's offspring, or Earth's major cities would be reduced to ash. Humanity had 1 hour to decide. The Cubs heard the message. Through the facility's public address system, through news broadcasts, through the panicked conversations of adults who forgot to shield them from the truth. Varix and Karen stood in their residential quarters, faces calm but eyes reflecting turmoil. "You will give us to them," Varix said. "It was not a question." "No," Nathan said firmly. "We do not surrender children to be murdered. That is not who we are." "Then they will destroy your cities," Karen replied. "Kill millions of your people, for 2 lives that are not even your own species. This is illogical." "Maybe," Sophie said, "but it is the right thing to do. We do not calculate morality like a math equation." "Our father would understand," Varric said quietly. "A warrior accepts sacrifice. We are prepared to honor our people by giving our lives to save yours." The words hit Nathan like a physical blow. These children, barely into adolescence, were calmly discussing their own execution as a matter of honor and duty. He knelt to look them in their amber eyes. "Your father sent you here because he believed you had a right to live, to grow up, to have a future. If we hand you over, we dishonor his trust and our own principles. So we are not going to do that. We are going to fight." "With what?" Varix asked pragmatically. "Your military is advanced for your level of development, but against Korath battlecruisers you are children with sticks facing armored warriors." It was a fair assessment. Earth's space defense fleet consisted of 3 orbital battle stations, 24 combat-capable spacecraft, and a handful of experimental weapons that had never been tested in real combat. Against a force that had been conquering worlds for millennia, humanity's military seemed almost laughable. But General Lucas had not spent 3 years hosting alien refugees without learning something from them. In those years, human engineers had studied every scrap of data from Threnix's cultural database. They had analyzed Vrak's weapon signatures, shield frequencies, and tactical doctrines. "We have something they do not expect," Lucas said at the Emergency War Council. "We have desperation. We have knowledge they do not know we possess, and we have the element of surprise. They think we are primitive. Let us use that assumption against them." Captain Julie Brennan, commander of the Orbital Defense Station Phoenix, spoke via holographic link. "General, my crew is ready. We have fitted our railguns with the modifications Nathan's team designed, based on Vrak's data. It is not much, but it might punch through their shields if we can get close enough." "Their shields," Nathan interjected. "That is the key. Korath's shield technology relies on predicted threat vectors. They calibrate for known weapons. Our weapons are technically inferior, but they are also completely outside their threat database." "You want to hit them with bullets," Lieutenant Amanda Cole said slowly. "While they are expecting lasers and plasma." "Essentially, yes. Our kinetic weapons fire at lower velocities than they would consider dangerous. Their shields might not even register them as threats until it is too late." It was a desperate plan, but it was all they had. While the military prepared for battle, Nathan and Sophie faced a different challenge. The Cubs refused to hide. "We are Vraks," Karen said firmly. "We do not cower while others fight for our survival. Equip us and we will stand with your warriors." "You are children," Sophie protested. "By your standards, perhaps. By ours, we are of fighting age. Do not dishonor us by treating us as helpless." A new communication interrupted the argument. War Alpha Threnix, somehow still alive, had received word of the Korath attack. His message was brief. "I come. Hold them for 3 rotations." 3 rotations in Vrak's timekeeping translated to approximately 47 hours. The Korath had given Earth 1 hour to surrender. The math was simple and terrible. President Helen Carter addressed the world from the Emergency Command Center. Her speech was carried on every channel, translated into every language, watched by billions who suddenly understood that humanity's long isolation from galactic affairs had ended. 3 years ago, Carter said, her voice steady, "we made a choice to protect 2 children who had nowhere else to go. Today we learn what that choice costs. The Korath Dominion demands we surrender those children to death. They threaten us with annihilation if we refuse. I have consulted with the leaders of every nation on Earth, and our answer is unanimous. We refuse." She paused, letting the weight of that decision settle. "If we are to meet our end, we will meet it with honor. knowing we refused to sacrifice innocence to save ourselves. The speech ended, the Korath deadline passed, and the attack began. Korath destroyers opened fire on the orbital stations. Their plasma cannons were meant to make quick work of primitive human defenses, but General Lucas had positioned his assets carefully. The stations scattered using Earth's moon and orbital debris as cover, firing their railguns in calculated bursts. The first Korath shield flickered in confusion as a tungsten rod traveling at a fraction of light speed punched through it. Behind it came missiles carrying nuclear warheads slipping through the shield gap before it could recalibrate. The Korath frigate died in a ball of fire. "They are adapting," Julie Brennan reported. "The trick will not work twice, but it did not need to. The humans had bought themselves time and proven they were not helpless prey." Ground-based weapons opened fire as Korath landing craft entered the atmosphere. Fighter jets engaged in atmospheric combat that the Korath had not expected from a supposedly primitive species. Humans died. Korath died. And in the Colorado facility, Varix and Karen watched the battle unfold on monitors. "They fight with honor," Varix said softly, his voice full of wonder. "They fight for us," Karen added. "How do we repay such a debt?" The battle raged for 36 hours. Earth's military, outmatched and outgunned, refused to surrender. Cities were damaged, ships were destroyed, and thousands died. But humanity held. And then, like a storm breaking through clouds, the Vrax fleet arrived. Threnix's ship materialized in Earth orbit at the head of a small fleet. 5 vessels, all that remained of his command, dropped out of faster-than-light travel with weapons already firing. The Korath, caught between 2 enemies, tried to retreat. Threnix gave them no chance. The battle that followed was brief and brutal. When the last Korath ship exploded, Earth fell silent. In the Colorado facility, Varix and Karen stood at the landing pad as a shuttle descended. When Threnix emerged, still in battle armor, they ran to him with joy. But Threnix did not simply embrace his children and leave. He sought out Nathan Cross, Sophie Martinez, General Lucas, and the other humans who had stood against impossible odds. "You bled for my offspring," Threnix said. "No debt is greater. From this day, the Vrax owe humanity a bond that cannot be broken." Nathan managed a weak smile. "We did not do it for a debt, Threnix. We did it because it was right." "I know," the War Alpha replied. "That is precisely why you have earned our eternal respect." The aftermath of what humans began calling the Korath crisis brought changes that rippled across Earth and beyond. The illusion of safety and isolation had been shattered. Humanity now knew it existed in a dangerous galaxy, where refusing to participate in galactic affairs was no longer an option. More surprisingly, humanity found it had allies. Threnix's declaration of kinship between Vrax and humans was not merely ceremonial. In the months following the battle, Vrax ships began regular visits to Earth, bringing not just warriors but engineers, scientists, and diplomats. A formal alliance was proposed, debated intensely in human governments, and eventually ratified by most of Earth's nations. Varix and Karen found themselves at the center of this new relationship. Now 15 years old by human reckoning, they had become something unprecedented, true cultural bridges between species. They spoke both languages fluently, understood both worldviews, and could navigate both societies with equal ease. "They are not quite Vrax anymore," Threnix admitted to Nathan one evening, 6 months after the crisis. The War Alpha had remained on Earth, overseeing the Alliance efforts. "They have learned things from you that no Vrax has known. They laugh too easily for proper warriors. They question things that should not be questioned." "Are you disappointed?" Nathan asked carefully. Threnix was quiet for a long moment. "I am proud. They have become something I never imagined, but something perhaps more valuable. The galaxy needs beings who can stand between worlds." The real test of that potential came when Katie Palmer, now 11 years old, approached the Cubs with an idea that would change galactic history. "You should start a school," Katie announced one afternoon. "A place where human and Vrax kids can learn together." "Why?" Karen asked, genuinely curious. Katie gave her the look that only an 11-year-old can give when explaining something obvious. "Because you guys are amazing, and everyone should get to learn from each other like we did. Plus, if there are more people like you who understand both sides, maybe there will not be any more wars." The idea was presented to both human and Vrax leadership with more formal language, but the core concept remained Katie's. Create an integrated educational program where young humans and Vrax could train together, learn together, and form the bonds that would define future cooperation. The proposal faced immediate opposition. Vrax traditionalists argued that warrior training could not be diluted with alien concepts. Human critics worried about sending children to what sounded like military indoctrination. The debates raged for months, but Varix and Karen had learned something from their years among humans. Sometimes you did not wait for permission. You demonstrated the concept and let results speak for themselves. They began informally. A group of 12 human teenagers and 8 Virax, adolescents, gathered at the Colorado facility for what was officially termed a cultural exchange program. The humans selected were all children of military families who had fought in the Korath crisis. The Vrax were offspring of warriors in Threnix's fleet, young people who had grown up in war and knew nothing else. Dr. Sophie Martinez and a Vrax mentor called Honor Teacher Kellix oversaw the program, but Varix and Karen led from within. They knew both worlds, and they used that knowledge to craft something entirely new. The days followed a structure that borrowed from both species. Mornings began with physical training that combined Vrax combat disciplines with human fitness approaches. The Vrax learned that humans, while physically weaker, could excel through endurance and creativity. The humans discovered that Vrax strength came not just from biology, but from disciplined technique. Afternoons involved academic studies. History was taught from both perspectives, revealing how different the same galactic events looked depending on which species was doing the teaching. Science classes became collaborative efforts, with human creativity combining with Vrax precision to solve problems neither could address alone. Evenings were reserved for what the program simply called integration time. No structure, no formal lessons, just young beings from two worlds learning to coexist. They played games that merged human and Vrax traditions. They argued about philosophy and morality. They formed friendships that transcended species. Lieutenant Paul Harris, observing one evening session, watched a Vrax adolescent named Thorix trying to explain the concept of honor debt to a human teenager called Danny Kim. "It is not like owing money," Thorix was saying. "It is deeper. When someone acts with honor toward you, you carry a piece of that honor. You must reflect it back through your own actions." "But what if someone asks you to do something wrong to pay that debt?" Danny asked. "Do you still have to do it?" "No," Thorix replied firmly. "Honor cannot demand dishonor. A debt that requires wrong action is no true debt at all." "That is actually beautiful," Danny said thoughtfully. Paul reported the conversation to Sophie later. They are teaching each other, not just facts but ways of thinking. These kids are going to grow up with a completely different worldview than either species has had before. The program expanded. What began as 20 young people grew to 50, then 100. A purpose-built facility was constructed in Montana, designed with input from both species architects. It became officially known as the Humanity Vrax Integration Academy, though everyone simply called it the Legion Academy. Varix and Corinne, now 17 and taking formal leadership roles in the academy, proposed a radical evolution. The academy should not just educate. It should produce something new. Integrated military units that combine the strengths of both species. Vrax warriors are formidable, Varix explained to the Joint Human-Vrax Military Council. But we fight according to doctrines thousands of years old. Humans are innovative, unpredictable, creative in combat situations. What if we merge these strengths intentionally? The first experimental unit consisted of 20 members, equally split between humans and Vrax. They trained together for a year under the joint leadership of Varix, Karen, and a rotating staff of instructors from both species. The training was brutal, pushing everyone past their limits, forcing them to rely on each other to survive. They called themselves the First Legion, a name that carried meaning in both languages. In Vrax culture, a legion was a warband bound by honor and blood oath. In human military tradition, it evoked the disciplined units of Rome. Their first test came sooner than anyone expected. A distress call reached Earth from a human colony ship that had been attacked by pirates. The ship was disabled, the crew was hostage, and the pirates were demanding ransom. "Send us," Varix requested in the emergency council meeting. "The First Legion is ready." "You are still in training," General Lucas protested. "This is a real combat situation." Then it is time we prove the training works, Karen replied calmly. Thrennick studied his children for a long moment. Then he turned to Lucas. Send them. They are ready. The First Legion deployed on a retrofitted transport ship. When they reached the pirate vessel, they executed a plan that would have been impossible for either species operating alone. The Vrax breached the hull at a weak point identified by human engineering expertise. The humans used ventilation systems too tight for either Vrax or pirates to navigate. The Vrax warriors absorbed the frontal assault while human squad members provided covering fire and tactical jamming. The operation lasted 43 minutes. No colonists died. No Legion members were seriously injured. The pirates surrendered in confusion. The report of the operation spread across both human and Vrax space like wildfire. The First Legion had proven that combined arms were not just possible but superior to either species fighting alone. Within months, requests to join the Legion Academy flooded in from both species. The experimental program became permanent. The single integrated unit became 5, then 10, then 20. Varix and Karen found themselves leading a movement that was reshaping how two species understood cooperation. But the true test of what they had created was yet to come. The warning came through deep space monitoring stations that both Earth and Vrax now maintain jointly. A massive fleet was forming at the Korath staging grounds, far larger than the force that had attacked Earth 3 years earlier. Intelligence reports painted a grim picture. The Korath had convinced 3 other species to join them: the Zelthic Concordat, the Mournful Collective, and the Harvesters. Together they represented a force that could overwhelm the human-Vrax alliance through sheer numbers. They are not just attacking us, Lieutenant Amanda Cole reported to the Joint War Council. They are trying to make an example. They want to prove that no one should dare to stand against them. That unity between species is weakness rather than strength. War Alpha Thrennick studied the tactical displays with the calm of a warrior who had seen countless battles. They have chosen their ground poorly. They attack us at our strongest. They believe we are the same forces they defeated before, not understanding what we have become. President Catherine Pierce leaned forward. How long do we have? 6 weeks, perhaps 7, Thrennick replied. Then we have 6 weeks to prepare, General Frank Lucas said. He turned to where Varix and Karen stood among the other Legion commanders. How many integrated units can you field? Varix did not hesitate. 32 full Legion companies, approximately 5,000 mixed personnel. Another 3,000 in final training that could be ready in 4 weeks. Not enough to match their numbers, but possibly enough to change the equation, Karen added, if we fight smart. The preparation that followed would be remembered in both species' histories as the forging time. Every shipyard worked at maximum capacity, producing vessels that incorporated both human and Vrax technology in new configurations. Human innovation and miniaturization combined with Vrax understanding of exotic materials produced ships smaller than traditional Vrax warships but far more capable than human vessels. The Legion trained day and night. Veterans drilled new recruits in the hybrid tactics that had proven effective. Human engineers and Vrax weapons masters collaborated on equipment that could be used by either species. Katie Palmer, now 15 and serving as a junior tactical analyst, observed something important one evening. She found Nathan Cross in his office. They do not think of themselves as human or Vrax anymore, she said, showing him training footage. Watch the body language. Watch how they move together. It is like they are becoming something new. Nathan watched the footage of a mixed squad moving through a training scenario. She was right. The Vrax had adopted some human mannerisms. The humans carried themselves with Vrax dignity. They had become genuinely integrated. 3 weeks into the preparation, an unexpected message arrived from deep space. The Trilax Commonwealth, a neutral power, requested a meeting. Ambassador Christine Harper and honor diplomat Xylix traveled to the Trilax homeworld. What they found surprised them. The Trilax did not want to join the Korath coalition. Instead, they wanted to join the Human-Vrax alliance. You have demonstrated something we thought impossible, the Trilax High Speaker explained. True integration between species. If you survive the coming battle, you will represent a new model for galactic civilization. We want to be part of that. The offer came with conditions. The Trilax would provide intelligence and logistical support, but their military would not arrive in time for the initial battle. They are betting on us, Christine reported back to Earth. They think we can win. The Korath fleet arrived at the designated battlefield exactly on schedule. They had chosen a system on the border between human and Vrax space, a mostly empty system with a dying star and 3 barren planets. It was good ground for a fleet engagement. The Korath commander broadcast a message to the assembled human Vrax forces. You stand against the inevitable. 4 species united against your aberration. You cannot win. Surrender now, and we may permit your species to survive as vassals. War Alpha Threnix transmitted the reply personally. We are Vrax, we do not surrender. We are humanity. We do not kneel. We are Legion, and we have come to teach you the cost of threatening those who stand together. The battle that followed would be analyzed in military academies for generations. The Korath coalition entered expecting a conventional engagement. Instead, they encountered something they had no doctrine for. The Legion ships did not fight like Vrax vessels or human vessels. They fought like water, flowing around enemy formations, striking from unexpected angles. Human tactical creativity identified weaknesses that Vrax weapons could exploit. Vrax discipline held positions that created openings for human strike craft to penetrate. Varix commanded the center fleet from the vessel named Unity's Edge. Karen led the flanking force on Honor's promise. They coordinated with precision, each anticipating the other's moves, creating a symphony of destruction that the enemy could not counter. Lieutenant Danny Kim found his unit pinned by a Zelthic cruiser. Without hesitation, he called for support from the Vrax heavy assault team led by Thorix. The 2 units executed a complex maneuver that lured the cruiser into a crossfire. The Zelthic ship died in seconds. That is 8 years of friendship right there, Paul Harris observed. They did not just train together. They know each other, trust each other. The tide of battle turned not through superior numbers or better technology, but through superior integration. Every Legion unit fought with a coherence that made them more than the sum of their parts. The Korath coalition fought as 4 separate forces trying to coordinate. The Legion fought as one. When the Korath flagship exploded, the coalition began to break apart. The Harvesters withdrew first. The mournful collective followed. The Zelthic tried to rally but found themselves isolated and surrounded. By the time the Korath commander transmitted his surrender, the battle had lasted 11 hours. The coalition had lost 2/3 of its fleet. The Legion had taken casualties, but their losses were remarkably light given the odds. In the aftermath, Varix and Karen stood on the bridge of Unity's Edge, looking out at the debris field. Father would be proud, Karen said softly. Father is proud, Threnix replied, emerging from the rear of the bridge. You have surpassed anything I imagined when I left you with the humans. You are something far greater. We are Legion, Varix said simply, as are all who fight under this banner, regardless of the species they were born to. The victory sent shockwaves across the galaxy. Within weeks, 6 more species approached the human Vrax alliance requesting membership. The Trilax Commonwealth formalized their joining. Trade agreements multiplied. Cultural exchange programs began sprouting across multiple worlds. 1 year after the Battle of Unity, the Legion Academy had expanded to 5 facilities across 3 worlds. More than 20 species had members training in integrated units. Katie Palmer, now 16 and serving as a junior ambassador, wrote in her journal, "We thought we were just protecting 2 alien children. We did not know we were planting the seeds of a galactic revolution. Varix and Karen showed us that species identity does not have to define us. We can be more. We can be Legion." War Alpha Threnix, in his final report before retiring, wrote, "I left my offspring with the humans in desperation, hoping only that they might survive. They have given us something greater than survival. They have given us a future where being Vrax does not mean standing alone, where honor is enhanced by partnership." Nathan Cross, watching new classes arriving at the Montana facility, reflected on the journey. "We were terrified when those cubs arrived. We thought we were taking a risk for morality's sake. We had no idea we were opening the door to humanity's greatest achievement." "Which is what?" Sophie asked. "Proof that being human does not mean standing apart from other species. It means finding the humanity in others and letting them find it in us." Somewhere in the Montana facility, in a common area where humans and Vrax and Trilax and a dozen other species gathered after training, Varix and Karen sat with their closest companions. They were telling stories, sharing the legends of their peoples and finding the common threads. Katie sat among them, listening to Varix describe a Vrax creation myth. while a Trilac student compared it to her people's origin story. The conversation flowed naturally between 3 languages and 4 species. This was the future that had begun the day a desperate father left his children with strangers, hoping only for their survival. This was the legacy of the cubs left in human care, who had returned leading a legion. Not a military force that conquered, but a vision of unity that transformed. The galaxy was learning a lesson that would reshape its future. Sometimes the greatest strength comes not from standing alone in pride, but from having the courage to stand together in trust. And it had all begun with 2 children. One desperate gambit and a species brave enough to choose compassion over caution. The Legion had come home, and they had changed everything.